make sure I understand how to use the technology. It's always fascinating when I go to speak at different engagements. I work with the Information and Communications Technology Council. My name is Maureen Ford, and I'm a program manager in the Immigration Initiatives group. And whenever I go to speak, there's always something technical going on. Either the laptop doesn't work, the pointer doesn't work, and I'm like, okay, is it because I work for Ictc, or is it that I get to be somewhat vulnerable and being technically challenged? So bear with me as I go here. So sometimes if a slide goes the other way, I'll correct it, okay? So welcome. I'm pleased to be here at the CAPLA conference. What I'll be talking about today is social media and how we use it in the program that I manage. I manage a program called the Integrated Work Experience Strategy, IWES for short, and I'll talk a little bit more about that program later on. Once again, the Ictc is a center of expertise in information and communications technology. We do research, policy development, and workforce solutions. And we work with industries to enable them to maintain a competitive advantage in the global market and to develop Canada's future skilled and innovative talent and workforce. So you'll hear me using Ictc and acronyms a lot. Ictc is a sector council. Head office is in Ottawa. There are about 32 sector councils, one for each industry in Canada. And I think that we have long names because they're all located in Ottawa and it's close to the government, okay? When I first started working for Ictc, it was very difficult for me to get it all out at one time because I was like, how come you guys have such a long name? But anyway, I now understand. So what is the ICT sector? It encompasses all companies that are in the technology center that develop goods and services that process, transmit, and receive information or data as you know it. We're a non-regulated sector in comparison to doctors, nurses, and engineers per se. We do have some confusion sometimes with IT positions being called software engineers, but they're not technically engineers in the sense of being a regulated profession. There are about 32,000 ICT companies. 90% of them are in the small to medium enterprise size. There are about 850,000 ICT workers across Canada, and of that population of workers, 75% or more have post-secondary education. Just a quick snapshot on Ontario. There are over 323,000 tech workers across all industries. The major hubs in Ontario are Toronto, Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, which is becoming the technology triangle for Canada, and Hamilton. Ontario's strength is in wireless communications, software development, and new media. And our labor market conditions are strongly influenced by immigration, and in particular internationally educated professionals who have IT history and background. One of the things that we do at Ictc is we do reports, as I said earlier, and research studies. So we have an Outlook report that's in the lower corner, lower left-hand corner. And we do, it's a forecast basically, and from 2011 to 2016 we know that we need to hire at least 106,000, if not more, ICT workers. In most regions, there will be systemic shortages of workers with the capabilities needed by employers, but the challenge that we face is that there's a mismatch between the capabilities that the employers are looking for and the skills that many ICT workers may have. So companies are facing recruitment challenges, and the challenging part for people looking for work, whether they're an IEP, which is an internationally educated professional, or a Canadian who's looking for work in the IT industry, is that the actual process of finding a job has a long churn. It takes a certain amount of time. So in Ictc, I work for what's called the Talent Initiatives Group, and what we do is once we know that there's a skills and labor shortage, we look at the occupations that require the right mix of technical skills, interpersonal skills, and business experience. IEPs will be the group to fill that shortage in Canada. But often, as I said before, they don't necessarily have the technical skills, the interpersonal skills, and business communication mix that employers are looking for. So the result is a lack of integration for them, and I'm sure that many of you may be familiar. I don't know how much it is here in Halifax, but in Toronto we have a number of well-educated IEPs who are PhDs and they're driving cabs or they're working in industries that are not commensurate with their experience because of the inability to make that transition through integration to a job that's commensurate with their experience. So in Talent Initiatives, one of our objectives is to improve the integration of ICT professionals in Canada, both once they're here and where we do outreach to them before they come to Canada through CIIP. So employer and partner engagement is what we do. We provide resource and information sessions. We have tools that I'll talk a little bit about later online. There's a workshops online, and there's a Canada Readiness tool. The Canada Readiness tool assesses competencies and is something that is free. It's online. If you want to go and access it, you can do that, and I'll show you that later. To go through the tool to look at the competencies. And where I come in is in the bridging programs and mentorship component of what Talent Initiatives is about. So the Canada Readiness tool, there are 3 assessment modules: workplace culture, communications, and skills. And we also have 3 information guides: resumes, interviews, and the labor market intelligence. We also have this other tool, Workshops Online. It's an e-learning resource for IEPs coming to Canada. So there's a language assessment tool in it, there's communication workshop, getting an ICT job in Canada, building an ICT career in Canada, and workshops for stakeholders. So all of these tools are interactive. You can go online and work through them. A lot of IEPs that I've been meeting lately in the program that I manage have been taking advantage of doing a lot of this work before they come to Canada. So the program I manage, the Integrated Work Experience Strategy, is a bridging program that prepares internationally educated IT professionals for an ICT career here in Canada. It's a program that was designed by employers for employers, and we connect with employers and we look to match them with the ICT talent that comes through the program. So what my program does is we connect the dots for the IEPs. We do what we call IWES Makes a Difference. So we address employment barriers with them for the highly skilled IEPs. We assist ICT IEPs landing to help them land meaningful jobs while they're here. And this process that they go through in the 6-week program helps to alleviate the Canadian ICT workforce shortage, because in the program we have about a 70 to 75% success rate after participants have gone through the learning of this program. So what we do is it's 6 weeks. Excuse me. It's 6 weeks. We don't do any technical upgrades. We do all soft skills development, so workplace communication, workplace cultural intelligence, we do business networking, we do all the employment preparation with them. We expect that they've done workshops before they come to us in terms of doing their resume, job search, that they have at least started so that we're not starting from scratch with them. We do personal branding and the social media piece. It's about a week, which focuses on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, which I'm going to get into shortly. Connection to community, we have guest speakers come in, and then there's a guided work experience that's 12 weeks after the 6-week period. So just so we're clear, I'm going to be focusing on the IEPs that I work with, but I believe that a lot of what we go through with them is transferable to anybody who's looking for work in Canada. My program is offered in partnership with JVS Toronto, so they're also an Employment Ontario office, and a lot of the soft skills development that we do, their employment counselors have to do with Canadians and others who go to the Employment Ontario office looking for work. So the eligibility requirement for my program is that the IEPs have to be here 3 years or less. Their Canadian language benchmark assessment has to be in the 7 to 8 range. What that means is that I do an interview with them, and what I'm listening and looking for is their ability to communicate effectively and hear or listen in English, and their reading and writing skills as well. Because one of the challenges I think that IEPs face when they come to Canada is this perceived barrier that they're foreigners and that they don't have Canadian work experience. But I think the critical thing that matters in the job search, whether you're an IEP or you're a Canadian, is that you have to have the ability to share your previous work experience in such a way that an employer is going to be able to say yes to you. Okay? So the IEPs have to have previous IT work experience, a minimum of 3 years, legally entitled to work in Canada, so they should have their permanent residence status. They're either unemployed or underemployed, and that they're committed to spending 6 weeks in the soft skills program. So we know that employers are looking to hire ICT talent, whether it's IEPs who have just come to Canada or Canadian talent that's here. But what they're looking for is a mix of technical skills, interpersonal skills, their business skills, and the communication skills. I came up in IT, and back in the day when I came up in IT, I won't say how long ago, IT was very specialized. It was like everybody, if you worked for IT in a bank, for instance, it was like you were God, because everybody came to IT going, we want this, and so there's this big queue, and we got to call the shots. But as time has gone by and as technology has advanced and developed, space on a computer is cheap. It's easy to produce code. There's lots of people who can do it. So, and also IT is now ubiquitous in every organization. So it's not just a specialty within an organization. It runs across all platforms and all, across, it's enterprise-wide is I guess what I'm saying. So employers are also looking for candidates who have recent business and networking experience. And given the current demographic trends, and what I mean by that, I didn't bring this particular slide, but what happens is in the secondary school system here in Canada, we are not necessarily encouraging our high school students to go into the sciences. So there is a drop in the sciences enrollment. By the time I think the sector catches up, or the graduates from the university catches up, there's going to be a gap in between. And that gap will be filled by IEPs until such time as the academic institutions start really pushing technology. Actually, it's the parents talking to their kids about technology and what's interesting about it, and that there's a possible future and career in technology in the future. So, needless to say, organizational growth, success, and ongoing innovation is all dependent on people. So the current realities for internationally educated professionals is they have the skills that are sought by Canadian employers, but to be competitive, they need a combination of the strong language skills, the soft skills to complement their technical expertise, and be prepared to present and share their previous work experience in ways that an employer can determine that they have the experience and skills that the employer is looking for. And what I mean by that is normally in our program what happens is when we meet new immigrants, and let's say at the interview I'll ask them, tell me a bit about yourself. And they'll tell me, you can see it on my resume. I have a PhD, I have this, I have that, and then I'm like, okay. So what I explain to them is, when you go into your job search, the first thing you will need to make sure is that you have a digital presence. If you don't have one, you need to have a LinkedIn profile. Secondly, when you do go to a job interview, they already know that you have the skill set they're looking for, because that's why they called you. It's on your resume. What they want to know about you here in Canada is, given the job description, how does your previous work experience fit? So in other words, you have to draw the bridge for them between your previous prior learning and what the employer is looking for here. Because it may not be obvious to them, and the other thing is your experience is outside of Canada. So they are going to ask you questions in such a way that they need to hear that you actually understand conceptually what the job is about. So the challenges that we look at in the program is understanding the Canadian job market and the search process, Canadianizing their resumes, identifying skills, abilities, and their prior experience, providing evidence of competencies, abilities, and their prior learning, providing references, sharing stories, examples of their previous work experience. There's cultural dissonance that they go through. And what I mean by that is, we've had situations where I've had, for instance, in France, I believe they do not require references. So when people go through the program and they realize they have to find references and their references aren't in Canada, they get a little upset about it because in their home country, they didn't have to provide any references. You got a job based on the fact that you're a PhD or your relationship with somebody was enough. But usually it was just their PhD or their master's. People would look at their education and hire them based on that. And so the whole idea of having to step back and look at how do I share this in such a way that people understand that I have what they're looking for is shocking for them. It usually takes 3 to 6 months when they get here to actually get through that process. We also have what I call the mature worker gap, and I think we also experience this here in Canada, which is you may have worked for a company over 15 years and all of a sudden the company downsizes and you're now out looking for a job, and you haven't gone on a job interview in over 5 years. Your resume, you don't know the last time you updated it. You don't have any job descriptions. You don't have your performance evaluations. You don't have, what's another thing I'm thinking of that would be helpful? So those are the critical things, the job description and performance evaluations, and helping one recreate their past in terms of being able to update a resume, which then would end up on, your pertinent information will end up in LinkedIn. So we also have that gap to bridge with people, and also then with that mature worker gap, in terms of how they share their information on LinkedIn, it becomes important then too. LinkedIn is not just a place for you to load your resume. You really have to pick and choose the pieces that you want to share or how you want to market yourself in terms of being able to have employers see you as a viable possible candidate for an opportunity in their organization. And it's also a way of being able to make you ageless, because we also focus on your last 10 years of work. Whatever you've done prior to that, if it's in IT, I would say it's pretty close to obsolete. So in terms of your focus, you really need to look at the most current 10 years. I think you can make notes about your other stuff, but not necessarily as an employer going to be paying much attention to that. And I think that applies regardless of whether you're in IT or in any other occupation and you're looking for work. So using social media for a lot of our IEPs is a challenge because they are, depending on the country they've come from, government, internet, putting your information out there in the public space is not seen as something that's safe. So we spend a lot of time really working through going into LinkedIn, getting them to go and log in and create a profile and to play with it so that they get the sense that they can build their knowledge in it and their trust of it, and also recognize that they can manage how much information they want to put out there. But it takes a bit of time for that, and I think that also applies not only in that situation, but also again with the mature worker who hasn't been into LinkedIn, who is not up on Twitter, who doesn't have an iPad. They may have just gotten a cell phone, and that's enough for them to deal with. Now in the job search, everything is on LinkedIn or it's in some social media, so you need to make sure that you're updated and that you do actually have a profile. So how does it help? So it's a self-marketing tool. It's an opportunity to showcase your talent, knowledge, and prior learning experience. Again, what was seen as a barrier, it's an opportunity to identify your skills, abilities, and prior experience. Provide evidence of competencies, abilities on your prior learning. Connect with references, and what I mean by that is I had a couple of participants who, the countries they came from, it just so happened that their most recent organizations that they worked for were no longer in business. So when a Canadian company now says, give me a reference, you don't have anybody to give them a reference. You've only been here maybe 18 months. You've come through my program. You're now shortlisted for an opportunity, and you don't have the references from your home country. So what they did, or what I suggested, was that they go into LinkedIn, see if they can find a person. So that didn't work because of the country they came from, but what they decided to do was go into Facebook, and they found other people on Facebook because they were communicating with their families and sharing pictures. So what they did then was through Facebook, they contacted the references to see if they would act as the reference and give them the information, which they all did. So there's different ways of being able to leverage and mine it, but you sometimes have to be creative and a bit of a detective to figure it out if you're looking for something specific. It helps reduce cultural dissonance. And what I mean by that is, again, that sense of not wanting to put it out there. You need to practice and become familiar. And Canada is a very different culture from the countries that a lot of the participants come from. So again, there's a bit of that culture shock. But once they understand that this is part of the job search here in Canada, they usually eventually ease into it and get their profile up to date. And then it's interesting because once the person gets their profile up to date, all of a sudden they come back and they're telling you about all the wonderful stuff they found out there and that they've actually generated job leads through the process. Again, it helps to decrease the mature worker gap in terms of building their knowledge, increasing their comfort level for them to learn and grow, and it's a relationship networking tool. And the reality is LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Be Known, there's a couple of others I'll talk about later. That's the way the future is going, and we all need to make sure that we're at least familiar with the tools and how to use them, and if we're working with others in terms of helping them to understand how to leverage their prior learning in those mediums, that you're able to support them in that process. So in the program, we call it easy as 1, 2, 3. So basically in step 1, it's to I'm just doing these short acronyms because the screens afterwards will go into a bit of detail. So the build, develop, and learn, access, prepare your profile, do the research of the various social media sites. Step 3 will be to create, connect, and then do your job search. So the whole idea with social media is to build your personal and professional brand. So social media enables IEPs or workers looking for work to take advantage of the role in developing their brand, because it's important that you have a consistent message, starting with your resume for most people, and then being able to make sure that that message that you have on your resume is consistent across the social media channels, whether it be LinkedIn, Twitter, and more so Facebook these days. I still think of it more of a social media, but it is changing. The businesses are registering on Facebook and searching for people there. So a resume, I see it as your brochure, but I think the critical thing to enhance the resume is to also make sure that you have the profile online. And as I said, LinkedIn, Twitter, blogging is another big one as well. So before I go on, how many of you have a LinkedIn profile? Okay. How many of you tweet, have Twitter accounts? Okay. Blog? Couple? Okay. So there's learn.linkedin. One of the things one of the other skills or advantages of the social media channels is that regardless of who you are, it gives you an opportunity to become an independent learner. The internet is full of tutorials and how-to videos, and anyone can teach themselves how to do it. You don't need to go to a special class to learn how. So all of the links that are in this presentation actually take you to the learning site so that you can actually walk through the process of setting it up and getting yourself ready in the social media space. But it's not working right now. So it affords a networker a chance to keep updated on the news, information and activities of friends and colleagues, an opportunity to follow people on Twitter and subscribe to them on Facebook. It offers a wide range of personal and professional development opportunities and networking without having to necessarily go to a course or a conference. The other thing we spend a lot of time discussing is the assessment of your current brand. So what that means is with the IEPs, we actually ask them to sit down and think about their previous experience, and to also then go and Google their name to see what is out there. Is anybody out there with your name? What do they look like? If you're going to set yourself up, you may need to have a picture if there are many people with your name. Did you find yourself out there based on somebody else's information? Is there any dirt, or digital dirt as we call it out there, that you may not be familiar with, that you may eventually want to eliminate or clean it up in terms before you create something new in LinkedIn, Twitter, or a blog? So the other thing, so these are the steps that we put them through. So they got to prepare their profile photo, because you want to make sure people know who you are and that it's actually you out there and it's not a fake. For the most part, people tend to be somewhat reserved about opening a profile that doesn't have a picture on it. So usually it's more credible if there's a picture on your profile. Prepare your bio or your personal summary. In terms of my program, we talk with the IEPs about doing what's called the elevator pitch, meaning when you're out networking, you have to be able to explain or share yourself in such a way that people understand and they connect with you. Because usually when they start to network, what they'll do is they'll start telling you about their resume and they'll keep talking, and they'll keep talking, and then you're standing there looking at them and they'll keep talking, and then you're like, okay, stop. So the other piece that's very important for them to understand is that, their first question is, well, then I want this person to help me find a job. And I said, but if you were in their shoes and you didn't know the person and they asked you to find them a job in your home country, would you do it? And they said, no, I don't know them. So I'm like, well, why would you think somebody here would find a job for you if they don't know you? So the whole idea with the elevator pitch is to introduce yourself, to create that initial connection so that you can build and start to gain trust, that you can then approach the person at a later date for an information interview or to have a conversation about opportunities that may exist with their company or through people that they know. Oops. Emails, another thing that's very important. A lot of people will have on their resume or in their LinkedIn a whole bunch they'll have emails out there. One of the things, there's two things that we talk about in the program: having one email that's for business only, and also from your phone perspective, do not have a phone that your children answer. Because we've had participants lose job opportunities because their child answered and said, well, they're not home, and hung up. So the company didn't call back, or the child didn't understand what the person was talking about. So you really need to have dedicated communication channels that only you are going to be responding to, that are for work. So each of the social media sites represent different spheres of our lives. So the personal is Facebook, the public is Twitter, and the professional is LinkedIn. I think one of the things that we spend a lot of time sharing with people, whether they're in my program or not, or if it's a job seeker, is to really get clear about what you can share and can't share in a public space. People sometimes feel that they can share their actual personal opinions out there, and I'm like, that's fine, but you need to be measured in what it is that you're saying. Because if it's political, if it's a religious thing, and you have a concern, or that you may be an advocate of a particular group, that might not be helpful, because remember, whatever you put in the public space stays in the public space. And a lot of employers are actually searching LinkedIn and Facebook to see what you have out there. And they don't want to find anything negative. And I'm not saying that they're doing this in a way that's eliminating people from the opportunity of the position in their company, but they're still checking just to see what's out there, okay? Okay, create and complete your profile. So the profile needs to include a photo, as I said earlier, Information from your resume, not just your resume posted up there because it's just going to take up too much space. You really need to get clear about, in terms of your prior learning, how do you want to represent yourself on LinkedIn? What are the 5 or 6 key points that you want to mention about yourself from the last 10 years that will actually make you attractive to an employer? What your past positions were. Summarize your experience, education, needless to say. Volunteer experience is very important. Whether you're an ITI, an internationally trained individual, or an IEP, or somebody who lives here in Canada, it helps because you never know who they know at work in the volunteer organization, and you're building trust with them. And the opportunity for them to refer you or recommend you to someone else goes up by the fact that you're out in the community and you're gaining more exposure. And then again, if those people trust you, they're going to ask you or send you an invitation in LinkedIn, which you're going to accept, or you can then turn to them and say, I'd like to invite you to be part of my LinkedIn network. Would you accept if I send you an invitation? And for the most part, once you've built relationship and you have trust with the person, it's highly unlikely they're going to say no to you. So that also helps with building your network as well. Recommendations and your specialties and your special skills. Connect. So you make sure your profile's correct, it's complete, it's suitable, it has the keywords and the thoughts, especially in the profile, summary and specialties that you want to project about yourself, because this is a marketing tool. And the product you're marketing is yourself. Connect with as many people as you can. I'm going to say that in this particular point, I agree that you should connect with as many people as you can, but I also think you should be very selective. When I see profiles that have too many people attached to them, it reminds me of going to a Business International networking meeting, and they have a contest at the beginning for the person who can collect the most business cards. And that's great, but did you connect with anybody? So you go home with a ton of cards, but you have no connections. Because you're not going to remember half of the people you got the cards from. You'll get the prize, but you don't get the connections. So I think the quality of your connections is very important, and that you should be selective about who you ask, or whom you invite to be part of your network. Just the same way when people send you invites, you really should know who they are. So for instance, in my role as the program manager, I get invites from all over the place to, into other people's networks, from people I don't even know, because I'm looking at their picture and I'm like, did I meet you somewhere? Do I know you? So unless they put something personal in the invitation to say where they met me or what the circumstance was, then I'm more apt to accept the invitation. But if I don't know who you are, I'm not going to accept the invitation. And I don't send out invites to people that I don't know. Even if I've met them at a networking event and I have your card, unless you and I actually connected and had a conversation and I emailed you and we could agree to go for coffee or do something that builds the relationship, I don't usually go out and just send invites just based on the fact that we happen to be at the conference. So, for instance, I'm not going to go to the office this week and invite all of you to join my LinkedIn network, okay? Because I don't know all of you yet. So keep informed about your contacts and stay in touch. From the search updates, and the newsfeed signals, you'll get lots of information. I get a lot of updates every time people change their status, their work status, especially with the graduates from my program. They're very excited once they move from, say, a contract to a full-time position, or if they're in a full-time opportunity and they get promoted, they put it on LinkedIn, and then all the rest of us get updated and get to send them congratulatory notes that they're moving up in the organization. We also strongly suggest to our participants that they follow companies, gather information about products and services, identify potential contacts, and that would help you find out about a job. But I'm also emphasizing that you follow companies that you're interested in. that you actually know something about. So for instance, when IEPs are doing their research about Canada before they come here, we ask them to research companies that are in Canada that they would actually want to work for. Even if you don't know anybody in that company, it sometimes helps to be clear about where you want to go, because I think when you have a clear roadmap, I'm also a big believer that the universe opens up and brings people to you that will take you where you want to go, but you've got to be clear in your focus about what it is that you want. When one is doing a job search and you're going, well, I'll do anything, which is what some of my IEPs say, what happens is, for instance, when somebody comes to Canada, if they haven't planned well, and I'd like to think IT people plan well, but sometimes in terms of money, I don't think a lot of times people realize how much it actually costs to live here. So by the time they come to the program, they're now at the point where it's like, I'm coming to your program, you're going to get me a job, and then I'm going to be able to work and save my family and stay here. But what happens is in the 6 weeks they are so focused on, I need money, that they can't hear what's going on in the program. They're not actually present in the room for the 6 weeks, and usually what happens at the end of the 6 weeks is they either go home or they take a survival job. So it becomes important that you be focused, and that's why I'm clear that when you have the roadmap and you're focused and you know what it is you want, as I said earlier in the presentation, it's an employer's market. They're taking longer to make the decision about who they want. What it also means is they put you through more interviews and assessments to get there. But the key thing is you have to stay the course. You'll find the opportunity, but it's almost as if the universe is testing you. If you're going to give up before you get there, then you don't get the breakthrough. Okay? The other thing we encourage them to do is join suitable groups in LinkedIn, especially from the IT perspective. So if you're working with, I know teachers and professors have huge communities out on LinkedIn, that depending on what your interest is and what your profession is that you're searching in, it is good to join a group. And not just to sort of watch the group, but every now and again say something or talk to somebody in the group or join a conversation or go to one of the networking events that the group is talking about so that you actually get to meet the people that you're talking to on LinkedIn face to face. Job search to find positions as well as to learn about what employers want and to figure out who's in the hiring position in the company, because you never know who someone else knows. It's like that commercial years ago, I think it was shampoo or something, and so on and so on and so on. But I think the networks are just like that. It's like when you drop the pebble in the water and you have the concentric circles that go out. The ripple effect is big in LinkedIn, and I think one of the things that we're now beginning to start to understand is how to leverage that effectively. I don't know if I'm going to try one more time. I don't know if this is going to, you know what? The LinkedIn on the presentation, I'm going to make sure that they have it. When you click on LinkedIn, there's a number of really good, this one in particular has a great video that gives an example of a lady with a business and how she grows the business and how she leverages LinkedIn to actually take her to the next level. And I think that's one of the big advantages of LinkedIn in terms of being able to expand your contacts. Do your job search, the recommendations. There's the potential in terms of mining your network is huge. Because what also happens in terms of the learning experience, people are shy about asking their network for help. But usually, if you make the request, those who are linked to you, who know you, and they know what you're looking for, if they know somebody, they'll talk to that person and either introduce them to you or do the introduction and connect you with the person and help you on the next step on your path or your roadmap as well. So this is what we also talk to the participants about, or anybody that's in a job search, that it's not a passive game. You actually have to do some networking, whether it be physical, meaning in the same room, or if it's virtual on LinkedIn. The other job search is with Twitter. Tweeting is great if you've got groups that you want to follow. There's lots of information. The thing that's interesting is LinkedIn sort of, people are connected to you. But with Twitter, it's sort of like having that piece of chocolate that disappears after you've had it. You read it, it's like it's out of mind. It's not something that you actually have to memorize, hold on to. You can follow the thoughts and see what's going on, and if something is of interest to you, jump in, but if it's not, you just move on to the next thing. We encourage them to initiate chats, but to also be clear about what it is they're communicating. Because sometimes if they're not clear about what the message is, it might be better to ask somebody to make sure that you're understanding it properly before you respond. Because some people still, with their English, will be very literal about what they see on Twitter, and may tweet something that might not necessarily match what they're responding to, because they've interpreted it a certain way. And then again, Facebook, as I mentioned earlier, being selective about putting your information out there. I know, as I said, companies are using Facebook more often, and people update their statuses on Facebook quite frequently. And friending is a big thing on Facebook. Me personally, I keep Facebook very separate. I don't business network there, but I know other people who do. But I think it comes down to a personal choice as to what you want to, where you feel most comfortable, and what you want to share and where you want to share it. Other social media job sites, the Beyonce, or I keep calling it Beyonce, but I'm sure that's not what it means. And that's what it looks like, doesn't it? And then there's Branch Out, which I know is in Facebook, and that there's other businesses who are using that to branch out and connect so that they can get job leads through through Facebook. And Be Known, which is also another expanded network established by Monster. So what we talk to participants about is don't let it consume your time, don't hide behind the computer, don't get too comfortable online, make sure you manage what you're saying, don't share unnecessary information. So for instance, I know that when we meet participants, if their resume has their photo, their their date of birth, how many kids they haven't gone through a job search workshop. They've come to Canada within maybe the last month, and they've just started their job search, or they've just come to the program. So that's when I said earlier about Canadianizing their resume, then we go through the process of learning what does a resume look like in Canada and starting that conversation from there. Sometimes one has to be careful about sharing too little, again, in terms of privacy. Don't sign up and then walk away, meaning leaving your account to become inactive. Now, I have to admit, I was one of those. I think sometimes when you're in a management position, I can't speak for all of the rest of you, but you get so busy doing stuff and delegating things to other people and having them make sure they're on Twitter and they're doing this and that, and then I'm like, everybody calls me and says, well, your picture's up there, but there's no information about you. And I'm like, okay, I think I'm going to have to do something about that. Take the risk. Join, share, and participate. It will pay off. Do be purposeful. Understand the privacy settings and pay it forward. Be smart and selective. The thing that we spend a lot of time emphasizing is what I call the career portfolio, because it is each person's responsibility to manage their career, whether it's a participant in my program or whether it's somebody who's a job seeker here in Canada. So you need to have your resume. You must have a digital presence. LinkedIn, Twitter and Facebook if you're up for it, but you must at least have LinkedIn. The other thing we emphasize a lot is once you've created the profile and you go for the job, make sure you keep all your references up to date and that you know where they are, who they are, as long as, and maybe, not maybe, but they should be attached to you in LinkedIn as well, if they're up there. Offer letters that are given to you should be kept as well, because sometimes there's a discrepancy later on. You're not sure what they talked to you about, and then you don't remember, and then once it's in HR, sometimes you can't get it back. So you need to photocopy everything and hold on to your information. Job descriptions, as I mentioned earlier, when you walk into a new job, for a lot of the newcomers, they don't realize that they have the right to ask for the job description. So if no one gives it to them, they don't think that they should go and ask for it. So they need to know that they can keep that. Performance evaluations, when one is done, that you get a copy of that as well. If it comes to pass that your contract is ending or your relationship with the organization ends, you should keep those documents too, because if you've been given a package or if there's benefits, you need to know what all of that is. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because I know that there was a big push for e-portfolios. And I'm just going to be clear that in the IT space, a lot of companies that I've spoken to, they're like, yeah, that's nice, but that doesn't tell me anything. I actually want to see the person. I want to hear them talk to me. I want them to tell me what their stuff is. Because they actually want to know that you can articulate about it, because the IT space is very much about communicating, and that you can communicate that you know what's in your portfolio. Because for some companies or management that I've spoken to, they've said that to them that equates to if a person walks in with reference letters. Anybody could have written the letter. Anybody could have put the portfolio together. I actually want the person to talk to me because I want to hear them tell me about their experience that I see on the resume so that I can then ask them further questions to ensure that I'm comfortable that they actually know what they're talking about. And I'm sure all of us, if you've been in an opportunity to interview people for a position, you've seen a fabulous resume. The person comes in, you ask them a question, and they're like, and then you're like, okay. So you go through the interview knowing that they may have had help or somebody else put the resume together for them because they can't support what's on the paper. So one of the things I think is critical is that you need to be able to support what's on your LinkedIn, what's on your resume, because ultimately LinkedIn it's important to have the digital presence, but I also know a lot of companies actually still want to see your resume as well. Okay? I'll say that. Oh, and the last thing, regularly update it. And your digital presence. You don't want to wait until you're in a crisis to do it, but I know that most of us do, given the way life is sometimes. The other thing I just want to touch on is we do have competency profiles online at Ictc. And I was going to bring this up, but when you go to our main website, there's a tab on what we do, and there's tools and resources, and the competency profiles are in there. And they basically give you, well, in our case, it's done for the ICT sector, but I think it's transferable to other occupations. But they talk about what the particular skill sets are or competencies for that position. And so for web developers or project managers or network specialists, they have highly specialized skill sets and they may require different competencies. So Alison can help you if you'd like to go in. She'll give you a free trial to try that out. And that's the end of my presentation.